Hey guys, so I'm super excited today. I get to chat with Dr. Peter Edmunds, and he's with California State University of Northridge. He is a marine biologist there, so we get to learn a little bit more about the research and what he's seeing in our ever-changing oceans. But maybe first we could just start out. Could you tell me a little bit about some of the research you're working on now and your role at the university?
Sure. I'm a professor at California State University at Northridge, and my research specialty is coral reef biology. And so I've been working on how coral reefs have changed for 30 years now, partly in the Virgin Islands and partly in Moorea in the South Pacific. And my research focuses on how stony corals are changing over time and the factors causing those corals to change, why they grow, why they die, why they're successful, why they're not successful, and the speed with which reefs return following disturbances. And then typically each year I go into the field, either into US Virgin Islands, into St. John, or into Moorea, French Polynesia, with a team of students to advance the cause.
That sounds great. I found a I found a YouTube video about some of your research in Moorea from 2010, and then I found another one from 2018. And I was just curious. I noticed in the 2010 video you were taking photographs of the coral reef and I guess looking at changes. Are you still doing that with the university down there as a part of your research?
Well, that certainly is the bread and butter of what we do. Our research starts with photographs, and without a time machine, that really is the only way we've got to reconstruct the past and remind our memories of what was there 5, 10, 15, 20, or 30 years ago. And so in both the South Pacific and in St. John, we take hundreds of photographs every year. We take them with as high as resolution as we can with the technology we've got. And then those photographs become the raw material to quantify the amount of corals, which species are present, who's growing and who's dying. And so that then creates the sort of decadal scale landscape of success of reef corals over time. And we use that then to motivate process-oriented experiments to sort of try to test hypotheses as to why the corals are growing or not growing. So we've got two parts of our research. One is the pattern-oriented investigations that documents where the corals are and when they're growing, when they're dying, to what extent do they grow back. And then the process-oriented investigations involve collecting small fragments of corals and growing them in aquaria and in giant tanks and trying to manipulate temperature and carbon dioxide to establish cause and effect as to how they're responding.
And I know that you have one of these. It's one of our mini dots of clears, and
Yes,
I have it here at my house. I'm teaching my kids about oxygen in our streams, trying to keep them entertained during the shutdown. Are you looking at the water quality in these areas as well?
yes, I mean, as much as possible. And that's the holy grail of what we're trying to do. It's part of the puzzle is figuring out who is there, who's growing, and who's dying. And that's the raw material that fuels the dialogue about the coral reef crisis, about what is there and what is likely to be there in the future. But then documenting how it's changing is only part of the puzzle. You're then trying to understand what's causing that. And increasingly in a sort of strongly human disturbed world, we're looking a lot at physical, chemical aspects of the environment, whether it's temperature or whether it's carbon dioxide or whether it's oxygen or whether it's light level or whether it's pH or whether it's something else that's driving the success of corals. So that work advances by trying to quantify the physical chemical environment in the reef habitats. And based on what we're learning in the reef habitats, then use that information to motivate the experiments we carry out in the laboratory. So we try to have that strong coupling between the field analyses, generate the correlational sort of questions, which we then move into the lab to try to sort of address as a cause and effect relationship.
Interesting. I know that's so fascinating. So I've been seeing articles come out about this shutdown and the human impact is so minimized right now. Do you have any sort of instrumentation installed in these areas that we can look, or you can look at the data over time to see how it might be impacting your areas for the better? Or have you noticed anything? Or I'm sure you're not there right now, but it would be interesting to see how this shutdown could potentially be enhancing these environments.
Well, that certainly is a very thin silver lining to a very dark cloud. I think it is a fascinating question asking how sort of the removal of tourists and reduction of CO2 emissions and reduction of boat traffic and everything else is affecting the habitats. And we can all see on television sort of wild animals doing more wild things in areas where humans are not going so much. So I think it is a very sort of interesting point asking that, and it's been a very sort of dark decade in terms of corals and rising temperatures and corals dying off and bleaching, and it'll be interesting to see how this year has affected the coral reefs that we study. I mean, I think it will probably be a better year in terms of their success, but when you put it in the perspective of what's gone on in the last 30 years, I fear that what takes place in 2020 will be a very small blip on a large calendar. But I think it will be a fascinating insight as to what happens when people don't travel so much and there isn't so much septic drainage from hotels and there's not so much pollution and there's a little reduction in CO2 emissions.
Well, I do know personally, I'm looking at how I can change my own habits and behaviors to impact the environment for the best. And hopefully this is kind of bringing forth those conversations within people on all sorts of levels. So hopefully this will be kind of a turnaround for the better in the long term. I have a question though. Do you have any of these mini loggers installed right now, or have you had a chance to use any of them?
Well, the project that I'm involved in French Polynesia is a very big project. It's kind of the United States flagship program in coral reef biology. It's part of the long-term ecological research program, and so I'm one of the principal investigators in a big project, and we spend a lot of money putting people on the ground and putting instrumentation on the reef, and we measure oxygen, we measure light, we measure flow, we measure waves, we measure carbon dioxide, and we use the oxygen meters to record long-term changes in oxygen. And the key thing that oxygen gets us to as well is community metabolism. So we're really interested in how the reef respiration is changing, how the reef productivity is changing, and that work requires us to be there, but we're certainly able to measure the conditions long term. And we've just got some further funding from the National Science Foundation this year to add some more PME loggers. The light sensors I think are going to be really important. We've just placed an order for 3 of those to put on the reef because, of course, corals are part plant and part animal, and one of the key things we want to be able to do is measure light underwater over lengthy periods. But as you and PME knows very well, the salty environment is so difficult to work in. I mean, you take it's like taking this beautiful, valuable Swiss watch and you drop it in this highly corrosive fluid and watch it fall to pieces. And all of the instruments we have, it's such a challenge keeping them working in that kind of environment.
Well, let us know. I know we have decades of anti-fouling research. We're looking in aquaculture, and that's really bad, those conditions right now. So we have the copper mesh and the different copper rings and the wipers available. And I would love to just learn more about how these instruments are holding up in your environment. We've seen really good response from our sensors in these environments, and we've been working in them for decades. So please do keep us updated on the data you're receiving and how it's helping you and how we can support you better with your research, because I find it fascinating and I really just want to jump into that ocean behind you.
I do too. I mean, I feel incredibly lucky to be a scientist and be able to continue my educational roles. And of course, I feel very fortunate to have a job and feel like, there's a lot we can do online. Like everybody, I'm spending tens of hours a week mentoring students and teaching on Zoom, but certainly pining for the time to be able to get back to the coral reef habitats and count the organisms that's at the core of our work and get back to those instruments that hopefully are working hard underwater while we are unable to do so.
Well, we look super forward to following your research and just learning more about how you're helping in these environments and what sort of data you're obtaining from these environments. And I know I've taken up some of your time, and I just want to thank you again for letting me chat with you a little bit more about your research. I find it really fascinating, and I'm super excited to learn more. I'm going to link your YouTube videos to this conversation as well, so people can look a little bit more into what you're doing. And if you have any papers or any other links that you'd like to send me, please do, so I can tag it along with this video.
Sure, I can send you some of the work we produced from our research. I mean, we feel it's important stuff. And as you had said, I think, again, one of the interesting points that's going to come out from this COVID disaster is whether people see a connection with their environment and see the role of what we're doing to the environment has ramifications far and wide, and certainly hope that might be one of the brighter things that comes out of this dark time.
I sure hope so as well. I'm really hoping for that, to see some of those articles coming out and how the environment's improving. Well, thank you so much again.